Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins. Welcome to Financial Lovemaking, where we talk about love, life, money, and everything in between. I'm here with my buddy, partner, and co-host, lifestyle expert, and licensed therapist, Miss S. Tia Brown. How you doing today, Tia?
I'm good. You always struggle through that.
I do my
Just say
best,
the
though.
great
I
Tia
do
Brown.
my best. I do my
The
best.
great S. Dot Tia Brown. I like that.
The
That's a new.
great S.
You
Dot
should
T
tire on me from now on.
S.
The great
Dot Tia
S.
Dot
Dot
Brown
Tia Brown.
dot. Be
Yes,
quiet. Be
yes.
quiet. Anyway, hey, you know what? I was reading this article on Huffington Post about, or it was written by a woman named Vicki Larson, who is the co-author of the book The New Do, which, or sorry, oh, The New I Do. Sorry, I read it wrong.
Right, right.
The New I Do.
Come on, work with
I know.
it,
I was
boy.
like the new do. Like what is that? Okay. Anyway, so she wrote this book, The New I Do, and she wrote had an article on Huffington Post that was shared about 19,000 times. So apparently people thought it was interesting.
A little
And
bit.
basically, she says that. Or she asks why women shouldn't, or she didn't ask, she tells people why women shouldn't pick attractive husbands. And in her article, she basically uses Anthony Weiner, the politician, as her case in point to kind of say that when you marry an attractive man, you're taking a huge risk. You're taking a huge risk that he's going to be unfaithful, basically, and that he's not going to be a good husband and father. And she provides some pretty good basis for her argument. For example, she says, or the fundamental crux of the argument is that men who have more testosterone tend to be more attractive, but men who have more testosterone also are the ones who are more likely to cheat, more likely to get divorced, etc., etc., etc. In fact, she actually presents statistics that say high testosterone men are 43% more likely to get divorced. They're also, I want to say, 35 or 36% more likely to be unfaithful. So, when you heard what she wrote, what did you think about that?
Well, I think that she makes a solid point when we look at, you know, things that we see from day to day in general, right? So she's saying higher testosterone men, men who have higher testosterone tend to be more attractive because they're more competitive, right? They kind of exude this masculine strength, which naturally makes them leaders, which naturally makes them feel and seem more protective and aggressive and assertive. All of these things, which kind of put them on the top of the food chain in terms of dating, right? More women pay attention to them. They're more dynamic. Even Anthony Weiner was a politician in New York where I'm based, not a guy that you look at and you say he's an Adonis. However, he has a certain, as people like to say, swag, a certain confidence. You know, he had pictures on his phone of himself working out at the gym, right? So women find this kind of attractive. And it's not just you. You know, that's the thing that likes them. When one woman finds someone attractive, it's usually multiple women find someone attractive. So that's the thing. There's increased competition to get his attention. Now, Chris Rock says something that I always like. You know, men can stop chasing, but when it starts chasing them, it's a little bit of a challenge. He said that in one of his comedy shows. So I think that this becomes a bigger issue that they get more attention. And even if they want to, you know, be focused with one woman, the temptation increases, therefore making it more common that you see men of power, men of prestige, men of influence having more choices than the average Joe. Now, to me, this doesn't mean that you should date an unattractive man because you think he's going to be faithful. This is just not the case. Every day, people are presented with the opportunity to cheat. Whether you're a man or woman, big or small, skinny, fat, bald, hairless, you know, full, like there are always opportunities. There's someone else who will find you attractive. So while I do think that her statistics give you know they definitely have credence. Ultimately, it's about the individual and that individual's commitment to being in a relationship, the bond they have with their partner, and then your personal astuteness, right? So if you see someone giving signs that they are incapable of honoring the commitment that they've given to you, then you have to decide whether or not you're going to, you know, turn the other cheek so he can slap someone else's.
Mm. You know, I do think that it comes down to the individual, but I think that there are some broader systematic factors that do come into play. Um,
Mhm.
you know, the guy who's short, fat, and bald is going to be different from the guy who's 6 feet tall and muscle bound with $1 million in the bank. because of what Chris Rock mentioned. You know, the whole idea of you having to do the chasing versus you being chased. That creates a whole different dynamic in your relationship.
I absolutely agree.
It can create a smaller margin of error. That means that if your relationship is on the fritz and things aren't going well, there's a difference between a man who can pick up the phone and call 20 women versus a guy who's actually got to go out and work and find women that he can be with. Now, I think that
But I
this.
also think it's important to make it clear that most guys aren't 6 foot, 6 feet tall, chisel body, and a millionaire. There's such a small percentage of people where all of those
Well,
things align.
I'm using that as an
Oh,
example, but I'm talking about just appealing men. There,
yeah, so
if
what I'm
you
saying is
have
that
men
there
that
are a
are
lot of
very appealing and
I
men that
say
are
this
not.
I say this to say that there are a lot of things that make someone appealing. So while I agree in some ways with what she's saying, I also think that people should not assume that you're in a safety zone because there are various things that make people attractive. And you have guys who are not stereotypically attractive or rich who have a lot of personality and they have a lot of girls.
Well, that's true, but there's no safety zone anywhere in a relationship in the
Right.
sense of being 100% safe. But it's like it's like I remember one time I was telling somebody I said, um, when you're out on the freeway, driving the speed limit is safer than driving 20 miles over the speed limit because bad things can happen. And I remember the person said, "Yeah, but you could die just walking out on your front porch and just get shot on the street." I said, yeah,
Right.
but the odds change dramatically between those two
Absolutely.
scenarios that we talk about. So, when you're talking about the future, you can't predict with certainty what's going to happen. I mean, you could be dating a frog who is just a promiscuous frog, right? But
Right.
there are factors that do come into play that you can look out for, and it goes back partly to what you were talking about in terms of looking at the character of that person. The character of the person does not necessarily, in my opinion, tell you necessarily if they're going to cheat or not when it comes to men. What a man's character tells you is whether he's going to respect you
How he's
as
going
he
to cheat.
right, or maybe how he's going to cheat or how he's going to conduct his business when you're not around.
That's what I'm
Is he going to
saying.
honor your presence or not? But
In
but
your
but,
face
but remember,
or not.
but that's the thing. I really just truly believe that you cannot always. A person's sexuality is complex and very deep. Just the same way you can't look at a woman and really know what she's like in the bedroom. Women surprise you all the time. Men surprise you in terms of how they're going to react when another attractive woman is around. They can give you one personality and then have a whole different personality when it comes to what they do when you're not there. And it's not so much because they're being fraudulent. I think it's because we separate those two parts of ourselves. We really do. I think same way with a woman. I think that who she is when she's not in the bedroom is a different person from what she's like when she's sexually aroused. She becomes in some cases, almost like a whole different person. Well, I think men, it's the same thing.
Wait
Sexuality,
now.
sexuality triggers a part of your no sexuality triggers a part of your instinctual brain that isn't necessarily present when you're conducting yourself as this upstanding, normal citizen, right? So to me, I think a man's integrity, or at least I tell my daughters, look at a man's integrity because this won't tell you if he's going to cheat or not. Because men have a whole different relationship psychologically between what we do with our penis and what we do with our heart. A man cheating on you
Okay, so
does
let me ask you this. So
yes.
do men deserve passes for cheating if it's done respectfully, which means
Mm,
it's not put in his spouse's face
I'm
or
not.
in
I'm not gonna
his face?
say. I'm not gonna say men deserve anything. I'm gonna say they deserve whatever you decide to give them. That everything's a trade off. So if you're in a relationship with a good provider and someone who's loved you relentlessly for many years, and he cheats one time, and you decide that you want to get rid of him because of that, well, just that's fine. Just make sure you know the trade off. Make sure you know what you're throwing away, in addition to what you're gaining, right? Because one thing that people consistently say that they've said for thousands of years is that men have a different sexual appetite than women. It doesn't mean women don't have their own appetite, but a lot of men have a strong appetite for sexual variety that has nothing to do with who they love. I've known a lot of good, so-called good men who could be defined as good men. I'll just say that men who were husbands for 30 years who said, "I love my wife. She's number one, no question about it." But sometimes I want something a little different, and I think that
Okay, so
that's
let me ask you this. So you often make arguments for, men's sexual appetite and that women and men are just driven differently. How are women supposed to make peace with that, knowing that I can have a man who, like you said, is a great provider. I care about him, but there will be a certain level of infidelity that I'm not allowed to replicate in my own behavior.
Um, I'm not going to say they should. They have to make peace with it. I'm not going to say that they have to adjust anything. I'm going to say that we might have the one thing we might have to accept is that men and women are different, and that every choice has a trade-off to it. That's it, right? And if you're okay with the trade-off, then I'm fine with that, right? But when we get to the point where I think sometimes when you get to the point where you think you can control another human being's life, and you can somehow be involved in every decision that they make, um, I think you're setting yourself up for extreme disappointment. For example, if I'm in a relationship, I'm not going to go through your phone and through your Facebook account because I might not be able to handle what I see. Right? I might see you having conversations with another man that would piss me off, but it might distract me from the fact that even though you have this side of you that I don't necessarily want to see, there's all these other sides of you that show me that you love me, right? So in a way, it's almost like a feeling that because you're in a relationship, you have to go watch your partner use the bathroom. You may not want to be in there when they're using the bathroom. No,
So, so
seriously.
what I'm
So
hearing you say is
yes.
like the confines of a relationship have really been, expanded to include every aspect of a person. And really, you need to have more tunnel vision on how we relate with each other when we're together, and not such a look on outside behavior.
Yeah, I think that the ownership of another human being is just it's a flawed strategy. It's not going to work. Period. Male or female, right? And and men and women, we all have our vices, but to somehow think that that women are supposed to behave like men and men are supposed to behave like women is just stupid to me. It's crazy to me. So when I see women that say, "Well, if men can run around and sleep with whoever they want, whenever they want, and sleep with 20 people a week, then I can do it too." I don't. I'm not gonna say you can't do it. You can do it, but understand society's gonna perceive it differently. Your body and your mind are going to react differently to sex because you have more, what was it, oxytocin than men do. So you, as a woman, on average, not in every case, but on average, you're going to form different bonds with your sexual partners than a man will when he's filled with testosterone. There's a proven scientific fact that high
Right.
testosterone neutralizes oxytocin, which means that high testosterone men can have a lot of sexual partners and have no attachment to any of them, whereas women have a tougher time doing that. It doesn't mean that there aren't some women who can do it. I'm sure that there are. But to think that every woman can do it because they saw some football player doing that, no, you're not a football player. You're a woman. Embrace that. It doesn't mean you're inferior. It means you're different. What's wrong with saying that?
Well, I think this is a really interesting perspective, one that people don't often have the courage to say. Men and women are different. There's certain things that men can quote unquote get away with that women can't replicate because innately it's not part of their DNA. And I'd like to hear what you listeners have to say about this. Is it okay for number one, women to pick uglier men so that way they can have happier marriages and not expect to not expect
You make it sound so appealing. I'm not gonna
because
say, it, but you
you are innately built in a different way. So you should accept that as a woman, you can give certain things and accept certain things in a relationship. And a
and
man is
and
innately built a certain way and he can only give certain things in a relationship. And
but
in
but but
order to
rem,
be
but
happy
remember this
together,
too. But remember this too. I got to cut you off. I got to jump in and say that the trade-off goes both ways. There are men who want perfection out of women, who want women to do things that women don't typically do,
like what?
and it could be something. It could be something sexual. He could be.
Because like
He
cleaning the
could,
house,
no, no,
is
no,
that
no, no. Well,
is
well,
that
it could be him expecting his woman to act like a porn star in the bedroom, like his favorite porn star. It could be her being a size zero. It could be her cooking and cleaning and taking care of the kids while he does whatever he wants. There are lots of things that you see some men that they'll want these things from women, or maybe one example might one common example is I think a lot of women expect men to be nice every or excuse me men expect women to be nice every day all the time, and they don't understand women have chemical adjustments that occur when they're on their cycle. Sometimes it just
like your period drives you crazy?
right, the mood shifts can just be like they're very confusing and
Boys,
scary
I'm
to
being
us.
slightly sarcastic
No,
there.
no, no,
Listen,
it doesn't
I,
not make you
I,
crazy, but
I
it
think
does
that
it.
listen. I think that some of the things that you're counting in terms of day-to-day tasks, while macro picture, yes, it is stressful when there's not balance and duties in the household. Fidelity has such a different weight because we're taught that our value in the relationship and our ego. And I'm saying for both couples, this is why men take it seriously as well. Fidelity is when you make that vow is a show of love, and that intimacy.
But a show of love is also not yelling at me for no reason, not nagging the hell out of
Absolutely.
me.
But you
So
were talking about specifically like the duties. I'm not talking about. I think respectful behavior obviously goes both ways, but I think that it's really hard for people to come to a place where we can say, okay, it's all right for one partner, and this is something that's kind of unspoken and done. We forgive men for cheating, but on the same scale, women are not forgiven. Like women are branded, like you say, whores. You ruined the marriage because you've given my special stuff away, even regardless of whether he's done the same. In addition, women are faced with the responsibility of maintaining the household, usually being primary caregivers of the children, and also bringing finances into the household when this responsibility isn't shared equally when it comes to household duties. So now you're a full financial partner, but also totally in charge of everything done in the house. So it's a
but
very unbalanced scale.
Well, no, I mean it might be unbalanced in a lot of ways. I mean, we have an unbalanced society. I do think that sexism is real. I think that women's rights, there's a lot of work to do, especially in the workplace. We have more women than men in the workplace, and women, we don't afford the kind of workplace that is amenable to women being mothers and wives and still being having access to success. That's I'm not going to fight or argue with you about that
Because
at all.
because
But
what I'm
but
hearing you say is you can cheat on me. I have to pay half the bills. I have to
no,
take care of the
no,
kids, and I
no,
have to
no, no,
be
no, no.
sexy.
I'm not
Take
saying
your
any of that.
lifestyle.
No, 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 no. You can't put that on me because I'm not defining anybody's relationship. No, no, no. What I'm saying is we have to accept trade-offs and realize that men and women are different. For example, if a burglar comes in my house and you're my wife and you hide under the bed because you're scared, um, that's okay. I mean, if, in my mind, you're the woman. My job is to protect you. Now, if I hide under the bed and say, "Baby, go get him," then I'm gonna be shamed for that, as I should be.
But
It's
but but
it, but
someone
it,
coming
it,
to rob your house in most neighborhoods isn't a reality
it's not
that
about
men
robbing the
have to
house.
face with gender
It's
role. No, what I'm saying is give us a tangible example of something where women are allowed to do less than men and it's acceptable. Because
um
basically what you're saying in
I think that if a woman is not able to provide financially, a lot of men will let that go. Some men do expect women to provide and bring in as much money as they do, but a lot of men will still holler at you if you're wearing your Burger King uniform and you don't have any true heavy economic prospects, as long as you're attractive, because they're focused on one thing and not the other. So I think for a man to say, I could be with a woman, but she's got to make as much money as me and have as much, let's say, have as much muscle mass as me and have as much and be just like me, then I think that's a problem. So that's what I think is a problem, is when you get to the point where you expect your partner to behave just like you in the relationship. They're not going to behave just like you. They're not going to bring the exact same things to the relationship that you're bringing because you're different,
I
and
agree
that's just
that
a
they're not
fact.
going to bring the exact same thing. I think that things are unfair. What I do think is a bigger issue though is that like what you said with finances, we know that women are graduating from college at higher rates and earning more income. I think that the trade-offs are becoming so unequal. And again, I'm not for or against couples working past infidelity. I think that it's a case by case scenario, but I am against this common conversation that we have amongst our friends, in front of our kids, the behavior that we show that it's okay for men not to be responsible to
I
their
don't think,
spouse
but that's
in
the
that
thing.
way.
I honestly don't think that that's the conversation that I'm
What do you
hearing.
think the
The
conversation is?
conversation now, that might have been the conversation 30 years ago.
Hmm.
With my grandmother's friends talking, yeah, they would say like, yeah, well, I don't like it, but whatever. I'd rather have a husband who does some things I don't like, who provides for us, than to have no husband at all. That was kind of the logic that my grandmother used. Now you see a lot of women who say, I'd rather be alone than to be with a man who cheats on me, which I think is fine. I'm not saying women shouldn't do that. I'm saying as long as you know that your trade off is gonna give you what you want. Because I think sometimes what happens is we live, we're searching for something that either doesn't exist or is very, very hard to find. So the new guy that you meet comes in with a clean slate, And then maybe 6 months later, you find out that he's just like the old guy, and maybe you should have stayed with the guy that you were emotionally invested in instead of constantly searching for the new guy who's going to be your prince charming, who's going to give you whatever you want. Because what happens is a lot of men get in the habit of just lying. Look, she doesn't see my track record. It'd be amazing if dating was done like business, where you had a credit report.
Do your
And,
credit score?
right, right, where people can look at your track record. Because what'll happen is, and I've seen this. Again, this is me giving one of the secrets of men. I've seen guys who are serial cheaters, and
Yeah, they're on their best behavior the first few months, and then they
yes,
start
yes,
busting.
because that's how long
So this
because
is the
that's how long it
question.
takes you to get the sex, and then by the time she figures it out, you just move to the next one because you've already got what you wanted. So, and the fact that so to some extent, when women are letting men kind of just walk away from these commitments, in a way, it makes it easier for men who just want to poach one woman after another. And one guy, and I'll never forget this. There was one guy I knew, and he was in that category you talked about. These unattractive guys who seem to have all the girls. And I remember listening to a conversation where one of his frat brothers said, "Hey man, how do you get all these chicks, man? What's going on?" And he said, "It's easy, man." He said, and I'm gonna quote him exactly, but don't pin this on me. Is what he said. He said, "It's easy. You just gotta sell a hoe a dream." That's what he said. He said, "You sell them a dream. You present the image that they're looking for. You make yourself appear to be the man that they've been looking for their whole life. And then by the time they figure out that you can't fit that category, it's done. You've already had 3, 4 months of good sex. You can move on to the next one. You don't even
Wow.
have to
Wow.
marry her." So I'm not saying that this is what I'm not saying what he did was right. I can just say that it was interesting. I mean, it really made me just think about this dynamic. So again, just so you know, I'm not telling people what they should want from their relationships. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying make sure that whatever you're looking for is really going to work for you, because you can end up almost like that movie Groundhog Day, where you're living the same experience over and over and over again. And one example I'll give, then I'll shut up, is and I'll give it from the male side. I knew a guy, and this was so funny. I knew a guy who, well, he was a devout Christian. I mean, he would pray all the time and everything, and he'd do Bible study 4 times or 3 times a week. And he told me, he said, "Dr. Watkins, I'm really looking for a pure woman, a virgin who hasn't done anything
Wow.
sexual, stuff like that." And so he said, and I was so disappointed because I met this girl, and we would pray together, and we were really close, and I was thinking about going on dates with her. And they were praying together for weeks and weeks, and he was making his move. And when he finally was ready to make his move, and he told his friend, he said, "Man, I think I found the pure woman I've been looking for." His friend, I kid you not, his friend said, "Man, I hate to tell you this, but I've been having sex with that girl for weeks." And he said, and he was telling this because he was his friend. And so he came to me, and he was very upset. Like, every time I think I met a pure woman, I find out that she's having sex and blah, blah, blah. I said, "No." I said, "Number one, it's very, very hard to find a woman who isn't sexually interested and active. And I don't even know if that's what you want. I mean, do you really want a woman whose sexuality is turned off? Like, I don't think that really works." And I said, number two, she was actually to some extent maybe doing you a favor or showing you some type of respect, because she was trying her best to present herself as the woman that you've been looking for your whole life. So she was feeding you an illusion that you were
So
looking
she was
for.
selling him the dream.
She was selling him the dream, yes. And I said, and really, I don't even know if it makes her a bad person that she was having sex. She's a grown woman. She has grown woman desires. Her ovaries start ticking when she gets around an attractive male because her body wants to impregnate itself. There's a biological fact. So is she a whore? Is she a bad person because she was having sex? No. In fact, I would say that if she didn't care about you and didn't care what you thought, she would have just said, "You know what? I'm screwing your friend too. So and I screw these other guys, and I
Wow.
don't care what you think." So to some extent, I just kind of said to him, be careful about sort of looking for this fantasy, because you're kind of setting yourself up as a person who's vulnerable to those who can convincingly persuade you to believe that they are the answer to your prayers and they're the
You
perfect
know what?
person you've
And
been
I
looking
think
for.
that that's the most important thing that you said, that you have to be careful about, creating a fantasy perfect person, because it's easier for you to have your eyes closed while you're dating and when you're in a relationship or looking for a relationship. So keep your eyes open, and really think about what fidelity means to you. Every couple, every individual makes their own decisions in the moment. So I say refrain from judging too much, but make sure that you put your own personal health, both physically and mentally, first. And that's all.